Hey, what's up, TikTok and interwebs fam? This is Roberto Cecchi posting for essentially the first time. My bad for like the glare from the lights in the garage and such. But the first thing I wanted to post about was my Skyline GT-R. First off, let me clarificate some things. First off, it is an actual Skyline GT-R that was imported from Japan. I used a company called Montu Motors out of Tampa, Florida. Or should I say I purchased the car from Montu Motors out of Tampa, Florida. And a couple of things that I'm going to be posting about. First off, I've got the engine here. And the engine, when I first assembled it, probably more than 2 years ago at this point, my ignorant self, I plastic gauged all the bearings, and all of the main bearings were perfect. They were all within spec. Only problem, when I plastic gauged the rod bearings, all but one of the bearings were in spec, and one rod bearing was slightly over spec. So there was too much clearance. And my ignorant self, I have built multiple engines before. Of course, they were for Hondas, as I was a Honda boy growing up. The sad thing was, with the one rod bearing being slightly over spec, my ignorant self figured, no big deal. If there's a little bit more clearance, that'll just mean there'll be a little bit more oil to compensate for that clearance. Apparently not, because the engine ran beautifully, I would say flawlessly, for, I believe I've got about 500 miles on the engine thus far. After about 500 miles, I think it's somewhere around 800 kilometers-ish. I don't recall exactly, because sadly the car's been on the lift for more than 6 months now. What happened, sorry, let me rephrase that. What had happened was I started hearing some sort of, I guess you could say it wasn't, well, it was a knock. I thought it was just a clicking sound. I figured it might have been something with the cylinder head in the valve train. And one day, I was still driving it here and there with that knocking going on. And as I said, I thought it was related to the valve train, which wasn't nearly as big of a deal. But apparently, it ended up being that rod bearing that I incorrectly clearanced, or said, hey, don't worry about it, it'll be okay. What had happened was the engine completely ate that bearing. I decided to, remove the engine from the car. We took the entire engine, transmission, which transmission's right here, and we took everything down and removed the oil pan, which, let me show you the oil pan. Check this out, the oil pan. Cool. First off, I'm getting ahead of myself. When I went to drain the oil out of the engine, there was metal chunks attached to a magnet that I installed on the oil drain plug, and it was probably about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches long worth of bearing material. Well, come to find out afterwards, it's bearing material, but metal material attached to the magnet. So I said, oh crap, that's bad. So what I did was, as I stated, drop the engine, transmission, the drivetrain essentially, and the subframe, front subframe. Come to find out that the bearing on the number 2 rod was completely gone. All the rest of them, if I was trying to shake them side to side just to see, there was only a slight bit, a CH. As most mechanics are known, that CH means a cunt hair. In my case, I'm calling a cock hair or penis hair, let's say, worth of play in them. The number 2 rod was flopping around like an SOB. So I knew automatically, oh, something was wrong with that one. Take the rod cap off and come to find out there's no bearing at all left on that rod. Not that it was worn out, but there was no bearing at all. It was completely gone. So that's what all that stuff that was attached to the magnet on the oil drain plug was the actual bearing itself. I've since cleaned up, as far as I can tell. I did my best to clear up all of the oil galleys using kerosene, because I figured that was the number 1 product I could have used to clear out essentially anything and everything from all the oil galleys. So what I did was, in my ignorant self, not having thought of it when I was assembling the engine, was that I have a crank from my first Skyline GT-R right here in the backyard, in which a telephone pole jumped out in front of me and, smashed my passenger side and completely clocked the entire powertrain all the way off to the driver's side. Bad enough that even the driver's side itself was completely distorted. So that crank, when the kid Ube, who I purchased the car from down in New Jersey, had just built the engine himself, and he put a brand new N1 spec crankshaft into his engine. So after I found out that the crank that was in the new car, her name is Akemi, by the way. My old car was Kitomi. That crank that came out of the new car, the silver one that's here over my right shoulder, was, first off, apparently significantly worn. I'm leaning towards the fact that the car was raced in Japan before it got shipped over here, mainly for the simple fact that almost all the suspension was essentially top level. For example, let me see if I can get this light to show. Olin's coilovers, the driver's side here, seeming as if it's leaking because it's kind of oily, I guess you could say. And in addition to the rest of the suspension components all being IKEA formula, which I found out is a top-rated brand in Japan that I don't want to say you could only purchase in Japan, but was, or is, I'm not sure, could still currently be a prominent name brand of suspension component in Japan. And I'm about to finish up my 10-minute spiel. So I'll post up another video talking about the second situation that I'm dealing with.